This is the story of a lonely boy who was discriminated against and hated by the entire society just because of his green hair and his foreign origin. He had only one relative who was his grandfather and one childhood friend. But from that circumstance, the boy rose up to discover the secret of the world, and from there saved the entire world from an apocalyptic catastrophe. But the price to pay was his very existence in the world he saved. And our story begins. Fukai is an orphan boy. His father had died long ago, and his mother also suddenly disappeared 10 years ago when he was very young. He lived with his grandfather on an island belonging to Okinawa. Had a close friend named Naru, and she carried within herself a great power that even she did not know about. That made Naru's body quite weak, and she only thought that she often got sick because she was born with a weak constitution and hated it. That day helped Naru search for the sloth she raised because she had lost it in the forest. After finding the sloth and bringing Naru to a safe place, went back to finish the mango gathering work he had left unfinished. Meanwhile, there was a group of people transporting goods for the military led by a guy named Gazelle. Although they did not trust the Japanese army much, they were still willing to work for money. Suddenly Gazelle's flying device malfunctioned, causing him to lose control and crash toward the beach. Happened to be right in front, so Gazelle had to quickly steer away to avoid hitting him. Gazelle then jumped out to scold because it was late and he was still there. But scolded Gazelle back because his terrible driving almost got him killed. Gazelle's partner Pippo then ran over and accidentally dropped the cargo, which made Gazelle let go so he could hurry to pick the goods back up. Then accidentally picked up a bracelet nearby and hid it. Gazelle's other partner Han told Gazelle that his vehicle had been severely damaged and might not be repairable. The delivery deadline was near, and Gazelle remembered that Ao's house had some spare parts for repairing vehicles, so he shamelessly asked Ao for help. But right at that moment, Gazelle's vehicle suddenly burst with energy and released a pillar of light into the sky. Everything became chaotic, so Ao had to run first, while Gazelle's group already knew from the beginning that this job would not go smoothly. At a military base, they detected that energy pillar and predicted that a disaster was about to occur. Unfortunately, the location where the disaster happened was a disputed area between the Japanese army and the Okinawa Islands Alliance, a troublesome place for them to intervene. Ao returned to find Naru to take her to safety. While the pillar of light had disappeared, leaving behind a gigantic entity right on the beach, Gazelle's group had stolen a few vehicles to continue fleeing to deliver the goods. Ao was taking Naru to evacuate when he discovered an alien creature had appeared on the island. Being too focused observing it, he didn't watch the road and bumped into the roadside. After stabilizing themselves, they continued leaving. The police and firefighters started evacuating the residents, while Ao returned to his grandfather's clinic. Ao's grandfather had to leave for the hospital urgently. He told Ao to sleep early because he had school tomorrow. But Ao wanted to go to work and help him. Yet his grandfather said that the duty of adults was to make sure children went to school, even if he was not Ao's biological grandfather. Meanwhile, Gazelle's group delivered the goods to the Japanese military. But unfortunately, they were missing the bracelet that Ao had taken. Gazelle decided to go find the missing item so they could get the rest of the promised money. Ao at that time called Naru to ask how she was. Everything seemed better, and Ao planned to give her the bracelet tomorrow. The next morning, Gazelle's group returned to the beach, but the alien creature had disappeared and only left behind a deep crater. Han suspected that the bracelet had been taken by the kid from last night. But Gazelle was thinking about the situation he had just experienced. He suspected that the Japanese military was hiding some terrifying secret. That morning, when everyone had just returned to their normal lives, suddenly 2 more pillars of light appeared right on the island and on the nearby sea area. Ao happened to be nearby when that gigantic entity fell down. He tried to call Naru and his grandfather, but both the network and communication lines had collapsed. The residents came and told Ao to leave quickly before the alien creature appeared. But right as they finished speaking, the monster had already arrived and attacked. Ao luckily survived, but those who warned him did not. He then ran away in fear while the monster kept shooting everywhere. When he grew tired of running, Ao wondered if he could do anything to change the situation. He looked at the bracelet, and it suddenly flashed, causing him to drop it. The bracelet kept glowing, and Ao discovered his mother's name on it. Memories of his mother returned, and he remembered that she used to wear this bracelet. Gazelle's group arrived, and he wanted to take the bracelet back. But Ao held it tightly and even bit his hand to make him let go. Ao believed that by all means he would not hand it over. Meanwhile, the military force was preparing to depart to deal with the monsters. But because they could not contact the defense forces on Okinawa Island, they could not grasp the situation clearly, which caused their deployment to be delayed. Gazelle saw that Ao refused to hand the bracelet over, so he compromised and told Ao to go with him, because he could not just stand by and watch. The Japanese army at that moment was discovered by the island defense forces and chased away. They kept running because they knew the island defense forces could not keep chasing them, as they still had to take care of the situation on the island. Right then, a secret device on the Japanese ship alerted the monster and made it chase after them. Gazelle told Ao that his bracelet was the key to a weapon the Japanese army possessed. He planned to ask the Japanese army to help destroy the monster. But if they did not agree, they would steal that weapon. They passed by the gigantic entity, and Gazelle said that once this thing appeared, it was a sign that the monsters would also come. Ao thought the monsters had the international defense team to deal with them. But Gazelle disliked waiting to be rescued, because if they did nothing, the entire island could disappear. Han then discovered that the Japanese army was trying to escape, so Gazelle rushed out to the sea. At the same time, the Japanese army realized the monster had begun to target them. Gazelle fired his grappling line to latch onto the Japanese ship. But the Japanese soldiers pointed their guns at them to fire warning shots. At that moment, the monster began firing and shot directly at the Japanese ship. Gazelle's vehicle was also affected, so he told Ao to break the windshield and get onto the Japanese weapon to fight. Ao then managed to jump onto that weapon. But Gazelle's group fell into the sea, leaving Ao with no one around to help. The bracelet then helped Ao open the cockpit and enter inside. He noticed the control panel was not too complicated, so he felt confident he could pilot it. Ao's grandfather at that moment was returning to find his grandson when he suddenly encountered Naru's family, who had gotten into an accident on the road. The ship then exploded, causing Ao and the weapon to sink into the sea. Ao was still safe and soon realized the bracelet was synchronizing with the weapon. He then discovered that the weapon welcomed its owner back, and its previous owner was Ao's mother. His hair then turned green and the machine began operating and rose from the water. The International Defense Forces had still not received any response from the Okinawa Island defense team, so they could not depart. But suddenly they detected a familiar signal appearing again. As Ao rushed toward the monster, his machine unexpectedly transformed into an armor form, and he rode on a flying board. Ao was still quite surprised by this mechanism. And although he was still scared when facing the monster, he forced himself to stay calm and continued to move forward. Naru's family at this moment did not believe that Ao's grandfather had saved them. The reason Naru's father showed disgust toward Ao was because many years ago his grandfather had saved a girl and let her stay on the island. But ever since that girl appeared, many things had happened, and that girl was Ao's mother. Ao had begun rushing in to attack the monster. But he still had too little experience, which caused him to be chased in return and forced to flee. The international defense team had arrived, and they realized Ao was an amateur for leading the monster toward the gigantic entity. Ao's grandfather saw the robot flying past and recognized it as the robot of the girl he had once saved. Ao realized he had made a mistake by bringing the monster here, but was immediately shot down by it. He barely managed to stay stable before crashing into the gigantic entity. Ao realized the monster was temporarily blinded by a type of gas produced by his robot. And this was a unique mechanism that the international defense team still had not been able to recreate. Ao then flew into the sky and lured the monster after him. It quickly rushed in and sliced off one of Ao's arms, but he managed to take back the severed arm and stab it into the monster's head to completely finish it off. After the fight, the international defense team demanded Ao reveal his identity, which forced him to escape. But he did not get far before they found him unconscious near a seaside cave and brought him ashore. Ao woke up and met Blanc. She wanted to know where he had hidden the robot, but he pretended to know nothing. He left afterward while Gazelle's group had been watching and planned to find the robot before anyone else could. That night, Ao returned to his grandfather's clinic and discovered island defense forces searching for him. They told his grandfather that Al was the one piloting the robot because someone had seen Al's green hair. Al was shocked and checked, realizing his hair had indeed changed color. In the past, Al's mother had also dyed her hair black because the villagers hated her. Naru had woken up and heard her father sending people to hunt Al down to extract information about where he got the robot. She secretly left and found Al in a place familiar to both of them. Al believed he had only tried to protect the island, but was being hunted by everyone. He also said his green hair was disgusting. But Naru did not care because he had saved the island. Al then decided to take Naru to see the robot he had hidden. Naru asked if he planned to pilot it again, but Al thought he wouldn't, because he feared he would only be hated more. He had done nothing wrong, yet everyone always treated him like an outsider. Meanwhile, the International Defense Team was still waiting for further orders when they suddenly received a distress call because their remaining pilot had been captured by the island defense forces while he was alone. Al was with Naru and planned to live isolated from everyone to avoid being hated. But right then, Naru's father and a group of people came out to subdue and capture Al, while Gazelle's group also found the robot but did not know how Al had piloted it. Gazelle after a while decided that if he could not pilot it himself, he would force Al to pilot it no matter what. Meanwhile, the commander of the International Defense Team Eureka was with Blanc and his subordinates heading to a meeting with the Okinawa Island Defense Forces. On the way, a little girl recognized Blanc as a world defense pilot and begged her to save her mother. The officer did not want to cause trouble, but Eureka allowed Blanc to help. The officer noticed that rumors about the pilots being children seemed true. He accidentally mentioned Al, which made Eureka interested. So he pulled the officer aside to talk privately and left the meeting to his subordinate Rebecca. When Rebecca arrived, she requested authorization for the International Defense Team to completely destroy the gigantic entity. But the island defense forces did not believe that monsters would appear twice in the same place and wanted the International Defense Team to leave soon. Rebecca then went to find the captured pilot Elena to ask her to return to the squadron, and she also privately told Rebecca that she must observe the gigantic entity from a distance. Meanwhile, Al had the chance to speak alone with one of the people who had captured him. The man said he had once visited Al's mother 10 years ago. Naru's grandmother then recounted that 13 years ago Al's mother had suddenly fallen from the sky and was saved by the region's doctor. Not long after that, Americans came to take Al's mother away, but his grandfather hid her and did not let them find out. Naru thought people shunned Al only because his background was unclear, but her father rushed in and claimed that Al and his mother had angered the giant deity of this place, the reason being that when Al was 3 years old the gigantic entity appeared here, and when the Americans captured Al's mother that gigantic entity disappeared as well. So everyone assumed Al's mother was the one who brought the gigantic entity to the island. And the reason they hated Al too was because that year several families died when the gigantic entity appeared. And Naru was the only child who survived. Al asked what he could do to atone, but sadly there was nothing he could do. Gazelle told his two friends the story and said the island was becoming insane and the people were simply looking for someone to blame. Eureka at that moment had found where Al was being held and barged inside to meet him. But at the same time, Gazelle drove his vehicle into the house to take Al away. Al then learned that the man who had captured him was Gazelle's father. He intended to use Al to negotiate with the Japanese military to demand independence for the island. But Gazelle had different thoughts because his father's childish ways had achieved nothing all this time, so he wanted to gain independence himself through struggle. He then took Al away and discovered a larger monster had appeared. He wanted Al to continue fighting, but Al refused, saying that piloting the robot had caused the current consequences, so he told Gazelle to drop him at his grandfather's place. Gazelle reluctantly agreed, and Al quickly realized the clinic had been set on fire. But his grandfather did not want Al to hate the people here because they were simply terrified with nowhere left to go. They were blindly trying to protect the island. Al understood his words and decided to return to fight once more. And Gazelle's group waited there in case he changed his mind. The island defense forces were trying to attack the monster when Rebecca called and told them ordinary weapons would not work because the monster could emit electromagnetic waves to disable them. So the International Defense Team decided to take over the incident. Blanc and Elena launched into battle and attacked from beneath the monster ship. It began releasing smaller monsters, forcing Elena to clear them out. But soon after, the ship released its entire force, making the battle look extremely difficult. Gazelle still asked Ao why he chose to return to fight, and Ao said that if he did nothing he would regret it later. He then remembered memories of his mother and realized she had once shown him this bracelet before. And the robot now recognized Ao as its pilot, making him understand his mother had arranged everything for him long ago. He flew the aircraft into battle, and his appearance caused the military to target him. The international defense team tried to contact Ao, but he did not understand how to use the radio, so the aircraft set itself to the simplest mode for him to operate. Ao realized these things were indeed not as easy as in the anime he watched. Blanc and Elena saw the humans deploying jets to shoot the monsters wastefully, so they were forced to rush in, one staying behind and one advancing. Eureka suddenly called Blanc and asked her to watch over Ao. Ao found a way to transform the robot and take out the weapon, but forgot that his other arm was missing, so he dropped the weapon. He accidentally entered a dangerous area, forcing Blanc to save him. She brought him back to the ground and realized he was the boy she had saved before. Blanc said that he had just entered the activity zone of the monsters, and surrounding their ship there would be a specific area for them to operate. And because they were on the ground and outside the activity range at this moment, the monsters would not attack recklessly, and she wanted him to stay right here while she returned to the battle. He did not want to sit still, so he asked her and her teammates to lure all the monsters away while he would rush to the main ship to destroy it. Rebecca did not trust an amateur who was even piloting a broken robot like him, but Eureka was willing to place his bet on Ao. Blanc and Ao were now able to communicate with each other through radio, and Ao had just over 1 minute to deal with the ship. He flew behind her and received the weapon she dropped, and because Ao's robot was the first generation model, he could be compatible with every weapon from the other robots. He spread bullets all over the ship, and just as the monsters detected him, he had already reached the engine and poured bullets into it, causing the whole thing to explode. The monster ship was destroyed. The next day, Gazelle's group discovered that the International Protection Team was doing something with that gigantic entity, and he pushed Pippo out as bait and then sneaked in with Han. Both of them discovered that the two aircraft were taking out some kind of green block from inside it, something identical to the thing Han had seen inside Gazelle's car the night before, and the meteorite core also stopped operating at this moment. He immediately ran back to stop Ao from being taken away, but Rebecca and Eureka had already reached Naru's house to meet Ao's grandfather, and they expressed their wish to take Ao in and care for him, but the grandfather wanted Ao to decide for himself. Naru also wanted to know where Ao was, because without her Ao would fall into despair. A few days later, Ao was taken to the city, and the guy in the purple shirt would be responsible for guiding him. Right in the city, he still saw many people protesting against the war, and the purple shirt guy said that things like this happened every day. He took Ao to his sister's shop to eat a bowl of noodles, but when his sister went inside, she was trying to contact the intelligence agency to turn Ao in. Both the purple shirt guy and Ao heard it, and feeling upset, the purple shirt guy took Ao away. He brought Ao to Eureka, and Ao met Naru again here. Eureka let Ao listen to his grandfather's message, saying that the robot belonged to Ao's mother, and she once charged it into enemy territory and never returned. He feared Ao would do the same thing, so he hoped Ao would not die. No one knew what had happened to Ao's mother, so Ao decided to participate to find out the truth about her. Naru wanted to go too, but because of her illness, he could not let her come with him. Naru gave him the sloth for him to take care of so he could always remember her. Meanwhile, the island defense forces had begun sending aircraft to capture Ao alive after receiving intelligence, and they later came trying to capture Ao at all costs. The International Protection Team had to depart quickly to leave, while Ao had gone to the robot that the purple shirt guy had hidden and piloted it to fly onto the International Protection Team's ship. When he reached the command room, he asked where the sloth was, but no one had seen it. The sloth had accidentally found Gazelle's group because they had secretly boarded earlier. Ao now had the chance to get acquainted again with Blanc and Elena, and he could now see their headquarters, which looked interesting, but he did not really understand why they built it that way. When they arrived at the landing zone, an entire technical crew was ready to maintain the aircraft, and Ao met Alex, who was the head of the technical department and needed to see him. He said the arm would need 4 hours to repair, and he would adjust it to suit Ao's high-speed fighting style. Eureka called Ao to follow him, but Ao was worried about the sloth, so Eureka said Rebecca would look for it for him. While searching for the sloth, she accidentally found 3 stowaways, and all 3 fell right onto her. She kicked Gazelle away, and he wanted to meet her commander Eureka. Ao was taken for examination, and through analysis they found that he differed from normal people in one point: his eyes, because his eyes could see waves that normal eyes could not, such as electromagnetic waves or ultraviolet rays. He asked about his condition, and Eureka said he was completely normal, and that his hair color was simply inherited from his mother. Blanc then led him to tour the base and told him that this place had many other pilots besides them. And she took him to the dorm area but realized she had forgotten to ask her superiors about his ID card. And suddenly the TV reported that the sloth was running wildly across the base. And if everyone was wondering why a sloth could run this fast, then don't worry, because I also have no idea. And Ao became worried and decided to run off to find it. Meanwhile, Gazelle went to meet the chairman of this place and asked him about the thing he had ordered people to take from the meteorite core. And he began to wonder whether this organization was truly a volunteer organization like the world believed. The chairman found them interesting, so he would compromise and let them secretly join the organization. Ao at that moment arrived at a crowded area and saw his sloth with another pilot team, while Blanc accidentally ran into Gazelle and his group walking with Rebecca, and Blanc asked Rebecca who they were, but she only said they were stowaways and then took Gazelle's group away, and they left without explaining anything, leaving Blanc completely confused. On the ship, Rebecca received news that a meteorite had fallen, and Ao at this time met the pilot team of the uncle, who was Bruno. And these were all his members, and the small girl looked tiny but was actually the same age and even considered herself Ao's senior. Suddenly Bruno received a mission and called the entire group to depart, and they returned the sloth to Ao and left with Bruno. Ao wondered why, so Elena explained that they would not join this mission because Bruno's team would handle it. Eureka then went to the command room and found Gazelle's group there, and the chairman said that from now on they would be members of the organization. Elena then brought Ao to the dorm and locked him outside to wait, and Blanc arrived and wondered why he was at the female dorm, and he used the excuse that Elena dragged him here, which made her wonder since when those two had become so close. At that moment, Bruno's group began entering the battlefield, and the 3 girls went ahead and discovered a ship of the island defense forces there. And while they were confused why that faction was present, suddenly a monster burst out and smashed the ship away, and it also knocked 1 pilot from Bruno's team out of formation. The monsters continuously appeared from behind the clouds, making them impossible to predict since the radar could not detect them. Bruno called for reinforcements, and the command room decided to deploy Ao's group, and Eureka refused because his team had just returned from battle. But there was no other option now. Blanc and Elena quickly received the order, and she told Ao that the organization originally only wanted to retrieve the robot belonging to his mother, so whether he wanted to continue fighting or not was his own choice, and no one would force him. He followed the 2 girls to the pilot changing room, and Eureka showed him his own pilot suit. The 3 of them then went to the hangar, and Ao met Alex, who said that Ao's aircraft had been repaired and was ready to launch, and the organization also decided to rename the aircraft to the name his mother had chosen, Nervosh. They then officially took off and headed into battle. Meanwhile, on the island that Ao had just left, an arms-dealing boss realized that his business partner was actually working for the government, so he had his men aim guns at him. And at a warehouse where the smugglers were transporting and storing weapons, the government soldiers quickly arrived to suppress them, and the smugglers tried resisting with normal guns, but they could not possibly fight against tanks. With the arm's boss, the man who had been surrounded unexpectedly defeated all of the boss's soldiers, and the boss had no idea who he was, and even that mysterious man himself was still searching for the answer to who he truly was. A robot pilot emerged from the swimming pool, but only saw a woman, while the warehouse was completely destroyed, and the commander's men did not understand why the commander had ordered them to fire back. But the real commander had been hiding the whole time and had not given any order, and he then discovered that there was a shapeshifter who had impersonated him to launch the attack. That shapeshifter then attacked and seized the robot from the man in the pool and piloted it to fly straight toward the monster that the International Protection Team was targeting. Returning to Ao, Ivica let him meet Jorg, an AI in their system, and Jorg told him clearly the location he needed to go to, and that their mission would be to deal with the monsters while also rescuing the 3 pilots of Bruno's team. And they were forced to go quickly because the command ship detected that Bruno was trying to head straight inside, and they suspected he would ram into the monster's ship to clear a path. And they tried their best to hurry, but in the end, it was still too late and Bruno had sacrificed himself so they could see the location of the monster ship inside the clouds. And the command ship wanted them to retreat because the explosion had caused the energy to become unstable, so their aircraft would have difficulty flying when approaching the monster ship. And suddenly the robot that the shapeshifter had taken earlier rushed in to assist by firing a few shots and then flew away. And Ao did not know whether the ship that had just helped him was friend or foe. And afterward they all retreated together, and the command ship wanted the whole group to try to rescue all the pilots as well as collect all the damaged parts to bring back. And Ao seemed somewhat displeased because the priority mission was to save people, yet the organization still wanted to pick up the broken components. And when flying past the shapeshifter, he accidentally recognized the robot Ao was piloting and looked extremely surprised. And when returning, Ao went to the hospital to visit the pilots, and he went to see the youngest, Chloe, and the little girl finally sat up and met Ao. And he told her that everyone was safe and hid the truth about what had happened to Bruno. And afterward he stayed to watch over Chloe so she could rest. But in the middle of the night he also fell asleep. And Chloe saw Rebecca calling Ao, so she listened to it and learned what had happened to Bruno. And since Ao was still asleep, Ivica wanted to let him continue resting and let the 2 girls sortie by themselves. And Ivica did not blame Ao for falling asleep because he had not been able to rest for several days. And Chloe then woke Ao up, and he realized everyone had already departed. And he thought he was useless, so no one needed him, and began blaming himself, which Chloe could not bear. And the girl said that everyone was only trying to protect him because he was sleep deprived, and going out like that would be no different from offering himself to die. And she was not too sad about Bruno's death because he had been forced to do that to save them. And Ivica was the same. Everyone wanted to protect him, yet he only thought he was useless and incompetent. And Chloe admitted she had tried to imitate Ao by charging into the monster ship's active zone, but that had only brought disaster onto them when they were counterattacked and failed. And after hearing her encouragement, Ao decided to depart. And the 2 girls had tried to fire from long range, but it was ineffective, so Ao went to them and wanted them to fire to open a path for him because the monster ship's shield needed time to recover after each hit, so he wanted to try using that chance to break in. And he rushed through the storm and then grabbed onto a small ship to land, and he broke the small ship so it would release more of them. And from there he used them like stepping stones to climb up. And when he approached, he simply punched through the monster ship's energy core and successfully destroyed it. And when returning he received praise from Ivica. And the shapeshifter then understood how his existence was related to Ao. And the next morning Ao and Blanc noticed that people had come to clean up Bruno's belongings. And Ao went in to look and saw that Bruno had always placed the children in his team as his top priority. And he worked with the principle that it was not time for children to die. And Ao felt heartbroken because a good person like him had passed away. And meanwhile the shapeshifter had arrived at the organization's front gate and attacked. And he continuously transformed from one form to another and finally returned to his true form. And this white-haired man called himself Truth. And Truth kept approaching the base and held out his hand in the shape of a gun and said one word, "Bang," and explosions kept happening without any clear reason. and the soldiers were forced to rush in to stop Truth, but he destroyed the main gate and went inside. And the police who had just been deployed to stop the intruder were all blown away by the explosion. And Ivica called Ao and told both him and Blanc to stay inside the room, and that someone would come to pick both of them up. And Blanc complained because she had to stay in the boys' room. But from the start she was the one who entered here first. No one forced her. And the commander also asked whether Elena was with the two of them because he had tried contacting her through the emergency channel but received no response. The superiors at this moment discussed this intruder, and they would consider this attack as a declaration of war. And although there was only one intruder, this could not be taken lightly, and the superiors then went outside to inform Rebecca that the first thing they needed to do was ensure the safety of the pilots, and depending on the situation they might have to self-destruct the entire base. And afterward we met Mirror. She was a fairly famous singer in this base, and she was supposed to have a performance, but it was now cancelled because of the attack. And her performing partners wanted her to evacuate soon, but she told them to go first because she still had something to do. And Mirror had checked through the cameras in the base and discovered that Truth seemed to be approaching this location. But as soon as she looked up, he was already right on the stage, and soldiers ran out to stop him and asked him where he came from. But he did not answer and only said he would dedicate this performance to everyone in the base. And afterward he grabbed the microphone and rushed forward and then fired a shot that blew away all the soldiers. And he then asked Mirror what she was doing here. And after hearing that she was a singer, he ignored her and left. And afterward Mirror listened through the radio and heard that the soldiers were gathering people to protect the shelter. But Mirror realized that Truth was not targeting that place at all. And Gazelle at this moment was vomiting non-stop when suddenly the restroom exploded. And Truth kept walking in here, and because the soldiers were chasing him they did not notice and stepped on Gazelle and his friend. And they pushed Truth into a corner, and he believed they were blocking him from seeking the secret of the world. And the command room at this moment noticed that Truth was only going upward and not downward. So it seemed he was targeting the pilots instead of trying to massacre as many people as possible. So the command room informed the engineering department to have the pilots sortie. And the chief engineer believed that only one machine could sortie now. But Rebecca, seeing the situation, thought that one was enough, so she let Ao go first. But just as he started up the machine, Truth was already right in front of him. And he noticed that Ao was exactly the person he was looking for at this moment. And he also asked why Ao was inside that woman's machine. And Ao realized he knew his mother, so he became very angry. And Rebecca pulled out her gun to threaten Truth, but he waved his hand and blew her away. And Rebecca was forced to order Ao to depart immediately. And he started up the aircraft and took off while Truth still followed. And he noticed that Ao was now using his mother's machine again. And afterward he transformed into a giant shadow, and no one heard any news from Ao anymore. And during that time the superiors had recalled Bruno's team to return to battle after their time resting and recovering. And they asked where Ao had gone, and the superiors said something. And meanwhile Naru, although she was sick, instead of resting had escaped from her family to find her father's workplace. And Gazelle had also returned home to meet his father, who wanted Gazelle to inherit his work. But he refused because his father had never considered him his son. And he also wanted to investigate the truth that the government was hiding from the people before thinking about anything else. And Naru's father at this moment discovered she was at his workplace, so he got out of the car and questioned why she had come here while she was sick. And she wanted to say something, but he cut her off and told her to go home immediately. And she obediently returned, but on the way she fell ill again and was suddenly supported by Ao. And afterward Ao took her back to her father's workplace, even though they were forbidden from entering. And Naru then followed Ao to an entrance inside. And although she felt Ao was strange, she still chose to follow him. And Naru then asked Ao about the difference in him compared to before, and he said he changed because of her. And afterward Ao threw away Naru's breathing aid and said she did not need that thing and should breathe deeply. And Naru unexpectedly felt much healthier and was no longer sick. And the cocoon in the middle of the construction site suddenly emitted glowing particles and made Ao and Naru float upward. But while they were enjoying it, Naru was awakened back to reality. and suddenly another owl appeared and told Naru to stay away from the one over there. And when she looked back, the person next to her had already become Truth. And he remembered Ao and now learned Naru's name, and Ao told him to stay away from Naru, and the soldiers also arrived at that moment. But he caused the ceiling to collapse to block them. And afterward he took Naru and flew away, but then dropped her next to his vehicle. Truth then climbed into the vehicle and left. And Naru saw that Gazelle was also piloting a flying car, so she grabbed his hand to climb onto the vehicle with him. And Ao piloted the robot to chase after Truth, and he thought that Ao's existence might be related to the truth of the world. But unexpectedly, Naru's existence was even more interesting. And Ao believed that Naru was just an ordinary girl, but Truth said he was too naive to think like that. And afterward he transformed into a gigantic shadow, and Naru suddenly realized that this shadow had appeared and protected her in her dream. And she then jumped off Gazelle's vehicle, and Ao had to quickly rush to catch her. But Naru deliberately dodged Ao because she believed she could fly, and she afterward landed safely but still needed Truth to hold her back before she lost momentum and fell off the cliff. And Ao ran over telling Naru to stay away from Truth, but she stood in front to protect him. And she knew Truth was the piece she needed, and as long as she stayed near Truth, she would be able to fly. And afterward Truth teleported and took Naru with him. And Ao tried to reach for Naru but missed, and afterward he suddenly woke up at the base. And Elena and Blanc told him he had been unconscious for 3 days. And Blanc reminded him that he and Truth had chased each other for a long distance, but when they found him, he and the aircraft had crashed into the ground while Truth had disappeared. And Truth was later wanted by the organization, while Ao was happy thinking everything he saw was only a dream. But Blanc regretfully informed him that what he dreamed was true because Naru had been taken by Truth. And the government at this moment was disappointed in the International Defense Force that Ao was working for, because the government had poured so much money into it only for the place to let a terrorist easily enter and destroy everything while they could do nothing to resist. And the next day the engineers were sighing with relief because everything had stabilized again when suddenly they saw Ao's aircraft taking off. And the chief engineer had to rush out and jump onto the aircraft to cut the power to stop him. And afterward Rebecca and Ivica said that their job was not to chase terrorists, but to deal with monsters before they exploded. And the chairman had to come to ask how they planned to punish Ao, and Ivica had not decided yet, so the chairman wanted Ao to be given only a warning this time because he had helped Bruno's team before. And the chairman viewed the pilots as his own children, so he did not want to be too harsh, and Blanc seemed saddened by his words. And the next day Ao walked around and discovered he was being watched. And everywhere he went someone followed. And when he walked past Blanc's place, Gazelle also arrived. And Ao wanted him to stop following him and angrily left. And Blanc wondered why he was following Ao, and he said he was ordered by the chairman to monitor Ao. But he did not need to hide and could openly follow like this to pressure him. And he also knew Blanc was the chairman's daughter and had a bad relationship with her father. And Ao was the same. And not long after that a new mission appeared in a desert. And the organization quickly received the information and sent Ao's team to sortie. And the chairman at this moment received a call from the minister, so he went to his office to answer. And the minister reprimanded his organization for letting a captain die and allowing a terrorist to cause chaos in the base. And the president could not speak in their defense because he was being pressured by other officials during the election process. So the only way to show their worth now was to handle the thing that had fallen into the desert. And the commander at this moment was working with Rebecca to outline the necessary strategy for this mission. And Ao only now learned that the chairman had sent someone to monitor him, yet said he viewed the pilots as his children. What a load of bullshit. And now Ao also learned that Blanc was the chairman's daughter. And afterward they suddenly received information that the monster appearing this time was very similar to the type that had appeared many years ago. And it could cause constant lightning storms in the sky and was very dangerous. And unexpectedly the superiors informed Ivica to cancel the mission by the chairman's order. And Ivica did not want to disobey, so he ordered them to turn back. And they afterward landed near some ruins, and Blanc knew that a mission being cancelled like this must have been due to some organization pressuring her father. and the only organization big enough to do that must be the US government. Jorg said that the people here are currently protesting against the US government, and the tension has become so severe that the two sides are on the verge of war, so just mentioning the monster and causing an explosion would be the signal that triggers war. Al remembered what had happened to his hometown and immediately became angry, saying that if they kept letting things happen like this, the people here would die, and he then ran off, and Blanc also decided to follow him. The two later met again at an abandoned house, and Blanc had heard that Al also hated his father because his father had left when he was still a child. So she felt that the two of them were very similar, that she also hated her own father. Al wondered why she hated the chairman but still worked here, and she told Al that 5 years ago, she and her mother had been involved in a terrible accident. And when they were taken to the hospital, the doctor could only save one of them, so her father chose to save her instead of her mother. She understood that if her father had chosen her mother, she would have died, but she still hated him for leaving her to live with this burden. The commander then arrived to find both of them and showed them the news, saying that the monster had caused significant damage to the people here, so the world had put pressure on and demanded that the US government step in to help these people. So the order to return had been cancelled and they could continue the mission. The whole group then returned to the ship to begin the operation. Not long after takeoff, the group finally obtained detailed images of the monster this time. This monster could emit charged particles that caused lightning to continuously strike down, and although their robots were equipped with shields against attacks from the monster, these lightning bolts were independent attacks, so just getting hit once would immediately shut down the entire system. The only way to win was to try to dodge all of the lightning, which was easier said than done, but they no longer had time to think about anything. So Elena lowered her altitude and began setting up her gun to shoot down the monster. Au and Blanc also quickly approached it so that Elena could continue firing, but they realized the monster was preparing to unleash lightning over a large area, so the other two had to pull back. Elena was unfortunately struck by lightning, causing her to shut down and require a reboot, and the commander was forced to call Au and Blanc to hold position and wait for orders because they needed Elena to carry out the plan. Suddenly, the whole group discovered that the monster had suddenly transformed into the form of a box and was speeding away. And through calculations they realized the monster intended to ram straight into the cocoon and fall directly onto it. And it was predicted that many people would die if the collision happened. The commander ordered everyone to return because there was nothing more they could do. But Au refused and believed there was still a way. But before he could act, Blanc had flown off first. She flew toward the cocoon and wanted to stop the collision, and Au also came to help her. He also wanted to help her get back at her father by surviving so she could punch him in the face. The two then flew up together and tried to hold the monster back, and both simultaneously fired at the two sides of the monster, and it actually began to crack. But there were less than 30 seconds left before the collision would occur. Each second ticked by, and finally the two managed to destroy the monster just before the collision happened. Although both of them were affected by the explosion, only the robots were damaged while the pilots were still safe. The two were overjoyed that they were still alive to return. Au and Blanc then headed back and wanted to see what the chairman's face would look like after all this. But the two then immediately discovered that the footage on television had been faked by the people at this base to deceive the US government. The chairman at that moment also said that the US government was questioning them about that footage because the US government had sent investigators and the opposing city had nothing happening at all. The chairman also reported to them that he did not know anything, and now the chairman needed Eureka to report the reason for their late return. He simply said that the ship's engine had malfunctioned, so they had to return late and that they had not interfered at all. Blanc and Au then realized that the chairman had arranged that footage to help them continue the mission. So basically the chairman had also saved many people. The commander then returned here with Rebecca and saw that Au and Blanc seemed to have become much closer. After that period of time, the Japanese military was now planning to test a simulation of an artificial cocoon in order to help Japan rise to become the #1 in the world. Since Japan had now been isolated by the Allied forces worldwide and by the US government, who simultaneously refused to give them any information, causing the economy to remain stable but the military to fall far behind other countries. Even though the military wanted to develop strongly, they knew the citizens would definitely not support this action because the people only wanted to live in peace. However, they still considered this necessary, so they decided to buy information about the classified documents related to the cocoon that the US government was hiding from a hacker group. However, this plan of the Japanese military was sent out by a spy. We returned to the group of pilots. Since it was their day off, Blanc and Elena decided to go to the pool to relax. But Al suddenly ran there and wanted both of them to focus on training. But Blanc believed that swimming was also a form of training, and she knew Al was impatient to save his girlfriend Naru. And the reason he didn't want to join them in swimming was probably because he didn't know how to swim. But he corrected her by saying he actually did know how to swim. Meanwhile, the chairman informed Ivica that the Japanese military was planning to test creating a monster cocoon, and Al's team's upcoming task would be to secretly retrieve that cocoon from the Japanese military. Right at that moment, Al's group walked past Ivica's room, and Al noticed that the chairman had just given some order to his commander. Not long after, Gazelle's group was sent to Japan. After a few troublesome immigration procedures, Gazelle's group finally made it through. The whole group then went to a hill near the military base to intercept signals and eavesdrop. Since this was the place where the cocoon had fallen into Japan, it did not take long for Japan to begin their research and extraction process. They were now beginning the research process. After a small experiment, the cocoon showed signs of activity, and the Japanese military became confident that they had now completed the first step of their plan. Gazelle's group was also surprised to hear that the first step of the Japanese military had succeeded. Ao's team was still out at sea waiting for orders because they could not move in deeper or they would be detected by Japanese patrol ships. Ao didn't know how long they would have to keep waiting, when suddenly the column of light began to appear, signaling that the monster had arrived. The Japanese military immediately ordered the capture of the monster to use it as a military weapon, because they believed that as long as they had the cocoon, the monster would not attack them. But they were wrong when the monster still began attacking. Ao's group then piloted their aircraft underwater to move toward the cocoon. They were not allowed to transform unless absolutely necessary, because once transformed, it would be very difficult for them to operate underwater for long. Ao questioned why they had to move underwater instead of on land, and Commander Ivica explained that their target this time was to retrieve the quartz ore inside the cocoon, the very thing the monster was aiming for. So as long as they took the quartz ore and retreated safely, the mission would be considered a success. Originally, the organization's job had always been to retrieve the quartz ore inside cocoons, but due to the nature of this mission, if the situation required it, they could destroy the quartz ore along with the cocoon. Ao still wanted to save people, but the two girls said that the Japanese would not be grateful even if he saved them. But since he was a child of Japan, he could not stand by and watch his fellow citizens suffer without helping. Ao shot ahead, so Ivica had no choice but to tell the two girls to continue with the mission. Gazelle's group now no longer wanted to eavesdrop, but wanted to head straight into the military base to get the information directly. Suddenly, Ao shot up from underwater. He had observed around the base and saw that the explosion only happened in one place, so the monster was definitely there. Meanwhile, the Japanese military commander was trying to escape the base when he saw Ao fly past. He thought that was one of their robots. Suddenly, a soldier in the vehicle shot the driver dead. He then transformed into Truth and claimed that the robot was his, not the commander's. He was about to kill the commander when Gazelle's group's vehicle suddenly launched straight down from the mountain. Ao at this moment dashed straight down into the water and picked up the signal of the monster. He carefully transformed and waited for the monster to approach. Just when he saw its signal was close, The monster was nowhere to be seen, but one of his legs was suddenly crushed. Gazelle and his friends had just gotten out of the vehicle that had crashed when they accidentally encountered Truth again. Gazelle noticed the gun at his feet and asked whether this whole mess was caused by Truth or not. The two girls had now reached the area containing the quartz, but when they opened it, it was all damaged quartz that had been repurposed by the Japanese military. Although these were only byproducts of the cocoon, the amount was large enough to be concerning, because if a huge quantity of damaged quartz was gathered in one place, it could cause an explosion. Ao still could not locate the monster when suddenly it dragged him deep down to the bottom. The water pressure gradually damaged the robot, forcing him to cut off one leg to escape. But the two girls arrived just in time to assist Ao. He then realized that the monster would reveal its true form when swimming into the area where fuel was leaking. So he attacked the girl's robot to make more fuel spill out and force the monster to appear. Ao quickly rushed forward, grabbed the monster, and crushed it until it exploded. But the damage to his robot was now too severe, so he began sinking. The two girls once again came to save Ao and pulled him back to the surface. Gazelle was questioning Truth about several matters when the two girls flew past carrying Ao, causing Gazelle to lose focus for a moment and allowing Truth to escape once again. Upon returning, the two girls asked why Ao realized how to make the monster reveal its form, but he himself wasn't sure. We then returned to the commander of the Japanese military. He had learned his lesson that Japan should just continue developing its economy instead of engaging in an arms race. But right after that, Truth appeared and eliminated his partner. He claimed he could see the man's desire to dominate Japan and wanted to cooperate to help him achieve an even greater goal. Not long after, at the Arizona desert in the US, a sudden monster landing occurred. Although the US military fought hard to resist and intercept the monster, in the end they still failed. In truth, this was not the first time the US had been attacked by a monster. Ao wondered whether, if the US was attacked again, they would ask his organization for help. But Commander Ivica thought the answer was likely no. Therefore, Ao's entire team had to wait for orders along the border. Gazelle and Rebecca were now discussing matters with a government official in the US, hoping the US government would accept the organization's help. But the official did not want their help and kept diverting the conversation to how he and Rebecca were once co-workers in the same company, though now each had gone their separate ways. Back when they worked for the military, the two of them had once wiped out an entire country during a conflict among the citizens of an island. After dealing with the cocoon that had fallen on that island, a civil war erupted there and dragged them into the conflict, and the US military soon suppressed the army on that island. The world then refused to extend help, causing the island's situation to worsen day by day. Gazelle had heard about that event before, that the island was slaughtering its own people, so naturally no one wanted to help a place like that. But the massacre the world believed to be happening was actually caused by their former company. They claimed that it had been necessary for the world to develop into what it is today, that the action was neither right nor wrong, nor the fault of any specific individual. It was an action for which all participants bore responsibility. Rebecca felt he hadn't changed at all since that time, while she herself had hoped she had changed enough to make up for her past mistakes. But he still believed that she was doing the same kind of work as she had back then. Ao was sitting and waiting for orders when suddenly Naru's sloth brought him a book about the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Ao realized that the name of the team Ivica led was based on the Pied Piper's name, so he wondered about the meaning behind it. The two girls said this name was given to the team by Commander Ivica, so only he would know its meaning. Jorg then transformed into a literature teacher and explained the meaning of the Pied Piper story. But Ao didn't want to listen, so he took the sloth away, and when he came back Jorg still hadn't stopped talking. Suddenly the president called to report that the US military had encountered another monster. But because this monster had a rather wide range of activity, the military used infantry to intercept it. Ivica unexpectedly asked the president for permission to deploy the whole team, and when the president did not allow it, he disobeyed orders and set out on his own. He then entered us territory with Ao. Ao realized this was a rare moment when Eureka directly went against the president's orders. Eureka believed he had a bad feeling about the US military using infantry to intercept the monster, so he overstepped authority to see the situation for himself. They then entered a town the monster was highly likely to pass through, and they unexpectedly found a group of people who still had not evacuated, so they went down to ask what was happening. When the commander asked why they had not evacuated, the group said that man over there had stopped them from boarding the helicopter. He then revealed himself to be Truth, and he did not allow anyone to leave because he wanted them to become sacrifices for the awakening monster. Ao rushed forward to take Naru back from him, but Truth used his power to stop Ao from getting close. The US infantry at this moment had failed against the monster once again, while Rebecca was being stalled by the government official who still didn't want to accept help from their organization. When Ao regained consciousness, he found the entire shopping district had been teleported by Truth onto a rocky mountain. The monster then appeared right in front of them and released small monsters that flew toward the people. Several soldiers there attempted to shoot down the small monsters, but once they were spotted, the small monsters immediately fired a lightning bolt that instantly erased the soldier who was struck. Fear flooded Ao, rendering him frozen in place, so Eureka had to rush in, push him away, and tell him to run inside quickly. Ao fled for his life while Eureka was forced to assist in covering his retreat. Truth claimed that humans had completely misunderstood the true nature of these monsters. The civilians later had to hide inside the shopping mall because the small monsters were still patrolling outside. Rebecca then received a report from the president that the monster now behaved very differently because it had never recognized humans as enemies before, but this time its behavior suggested it had evolved. The president wanted Rebecca to negotiate with that official quickly, and she had full authority to set any conditions if needed. Gazelle then noticed Rebecca was still hesitant, probably because of Eureka. Commander Eureka then apologized to Ao for dragging him into such a dangerous place. He revealed that he had once been a soldier of the country on the island that Rebecca had wiped out before. Although he had lost so much in that battle, he had no right to resent anyone because both sides were equally at fault. That was why he joined this organization to make up for his own mistakes. However, because only minors could pilot the robots, he decided to choose the name of the Pied Piper of Hamelin to see himself as someone leading children into battle. Ao later walked around the shopping mall and discovered that all the mannequins had been shot to pieces by the small monsters, but one mannequin inside a tent was intact. The commander and several soldiers were trying to find a way to open an escape route when Ao suddenly ran out with a tent and hid right in the middle of the small monsters. They saw him, but left once he was inside the tent. Ao quickly ran back and told Commander Eureka what he had just tested, because he saw the mannequins upstairs all destroyed, but the one inside the tent remained untouched. So he realized that the small monsters identified humans by their shape. Therefore, he wanted everyone to join him in finding a way out. Everyone then brought tents and prepared to move outside. They walked in a line and successfully passed by the small monsters. Rebecca then told Gazelle to leave her with her former boss for a moment. Gazelle went outside, while the official was now ready to let Rebecca leave with a request for help, but with one condition. She pointed her gun at him and asked what the condition was. Not long after, the deployment order was sent to Ao's team. The two girls quickly went with the main ship to pick Ao and the commander up, and the commander at that moment informed Ao that he had a plan to handle the monster. The two girls soon encountered the monster and lured it into chasing them, while Ao approached from below, and the monster immediately released a swarm of small creatures. Ao had to continuously deal with the small creatures, so he could not get close to the main monster. Thus, Eureka called the two girls and told them to attack the moment the monster opened its mouth to release the smaller creatures, and the way to make it open its mouth was that he would use himself as bait. He fired a missile toward it, causing it to open its mouth and release the swarm, and the two girls immediately flew up and fired into its mouth, successfully destroying the monster. When they returned to the ship, Rebecca told Commander Ivica not to risk himself like that ever again because the whole team needed a leader like him. Not long after, Gazelle and his team had the chance to go investigate a few things, and he discovered that the singer Mirror, who had been at their base before, had been traveling everywhere performing throughout this time. However, while they still had no information, his group examined Mirror's face carefully, and when comparing it, it looked quite similar to Elena. Elena at that moment was rather confused, and perhaps did not even recognize that her own name was Elena. But since they were on a mission, Blanc and Al could only ignore Elena's issue and focus on the mission first. Two beams of light appeared, and Al wondered where these monsters even came from. Gio said that this issue was still only at the level of a hypothesis, and no one had actually proven where the monsters came from. Al then passed through the dust and saw the cocoon, but did not see the monster. He noticed a black smoke appearing and thought it was Truth, so Al flew around to attack it. But when the two girls arrived, that smoke vanished. From the ground, a black creature drew the face of the president right when Blanc was speaking ill of her father. She felt embarrassed when the president's face appeared, so she fired her gun to erase the drawing. No one was sure whether the monster truly appeared this time or not, so for now they continued collecting the quartz ore first. While retrieving it, some stream of sand unexpectedly entered Elena's robot. That night, the president discussed a few things with Gazelle. He suspected that Elena and Mirror were the same person, so he went to the research facility where the president had found Elena. He said this facility had been created to produce children who met the standards to become pilots for the robots. Nations experimented on the children to increase their compatibility with the robots. However, Elena had trained at this facility for 2 years, so he still believed she was completely normal. Gazelle's friend said that Elena could not be training at the base while also performing somewhere far across the world, so he wanted Gazelle to give up that idea. But Truth had once told Gazelle that he must try to search for the truth so the truth could come to him. We then learned that the US government had intentionally planted Mirror into the organization to search for some classified information inside. But in the last 2 months, they realized that the Mirror they hired and the Mirror they had been communicating with recently were not the same. The appearance was similar, but the voice and singing were very different. And then they proposed a hypothesis that the Mirror they had been in contact with might actually be Elena. Meanwhile, the engineering team was performing maintenance on the robots when suddenly the sand inside Elena's robot burst out and entered the bodies of the 3 girls from Bruno's team, causing them to lose their minds and fly away in their aircraft. Elena was also possessed by that sand, making her unable to distinguish who she truly was, Mirror or Elena. She then ran to Al. At that moment, he still did not know what the smoke he encountered was, when Elena ran in and hugged him, causing him to be affected by the sand and follow her. Ivica then discovered the 3 girls of Bruno's team suddenly flying in the sky and then abruptly falling. The engineers had to cut their power and then go inside to restrain and sedate them so they would stop hallucinating. Blanc had the same condition, so she was sedated as well to stop her from resisting. They later discovered the reason was this sand, which had properties similar to the fuel they used for the robots, and this substance only affected the children whose brains had been modified to pilot the robots. They then wondered where Al and Elena were, since Al was a case whose brain had been naturally modified rather than artificially experimented on like the others. Elena had brought Al to watch Mirror perform, and Mirror's co-workers came over and questioned where she had been all this time. But she immediately shot the 2 co-workers and told Elena to leave with her. She wanted to take Al out of the base because she believed they were being deceived here. They got onto a vehicle to find a way out of the base, but Commander Ivica and the soldiers blocked the path ahead. Al at that moment fell into another illusion and began seeing Elena and Mirror as his mother and Noru, causing Elena to suddenly pull Al and jump out of the vehicle, telling the commander to shoot down that vehicle. He ordered his soldiers to open fire and burned Mirror inside the vehicle. We now learned that the monster this time was actually the sand itself. It had transformed into Mirror to deceive Elena. Meanwhile, the president summoned Gazelle back and said he no longer needed to investigate. The US military, meanwhile, had investigated Elena and located the home of the caretaker who once took care of her. But surprisingly, the real Elena had actually died, and the current Elena was someone using the identity of the deceased Elena. Naru and Truth were still at the cocoon, and Truth noticed that Naru was about to absorb all the power from it. Naru wondered why Truth was only kind to her, and Truth said it was because the two of them were very similar, both seeking the truth and rejecting this world. Naru admitted that Truth was not evil because he had not killed Ao. Meanwhile, Gazelle had searched underground in the facility when the director detected him. The director wondered why they were here, but Gazelle said that he was an independent unit under the president's authority, so he could go wherever he wanted. He questioned why they stored quartz ore here, but the director said that nothing was stored here at all, and that it was kept somewhere else, and that place was actually the space station where Ao's team had now arrived. Eureka disliked zero gravity, so he quickly led the group to an area with gravity to move more easily. Ao then met the commander of the space station, Hannah, and he saw an AI similar to Jorg, but it told him that it was still the Jorg he knew because it was the entire system and not just a single computer. Meanwhile, the Japanese military commander met Truth again and told him he had found some interesting information about him, that he had once been the adopted son of a certain scientist. At the same time, we learned that Ao's entire group had gone into space because a cocoon had appeared out there, and it was expected to explode and cause many fragments to fall to Earth. Thus, if they succeeded in this mission, their organization would be acknowledged worldwide. But if they failed, all sponsors would abandon them. Ao wondered about the security team at the space station, and Blanc explained that their mission was only to guard the quartz ore collected by the organization, and they would only support other tasks, not directly participate. Ao was ready to sortie, but he was suddenly shocked because he could no longer see the path of the wind. Commander Hannah seemed to realize something and ordered Ao to return while the two girls waited for instructions. Rebecca asked him about the path of the wind, and he told her he had always seen a guiding path and simply followed it. Everyone then realized that Ao had always been seeing atomic particles that normal people could not see. Ao did not understand how everyone seemed to know more about him than he did, and they all thought he might be an alien, because years ago, the military had recorded the aircraft he was riding appearing from a pillar of light similar to the cocoons and the monsters, and from that aircraft, his mother had fallen to Earth. Everyone then thought that Ao should not fight, partly because he would be unstable in action, and partly because they feared he might have to fight his own kind. But Ao remained confident that he was fine and could go into battle if he was more careful. They then began devising a plan for Ao, saying that he only needed to fly straight along the trajectory and crash into the cocoon to change its direction, and Ivica said that if the trajectory shifted, they would take responsibility and rescue Ao. They later encountered the monster, and the two girls stayed at a distance to support and help Ao approach it. He tried to shoot it down but was swallowed by it. However, no one worried because Ao destroyed it from the inside and escaped. Ao then used a fragment to push himself toward the cocoon, but a Japanese satellite unexpectedly fired at the cocoon, causing it to split apart and continue falling straight toward Earth along its original trajectory. Ao was thrown onto it and could not change its direction, so he was about to be pulled down with it by gravity. They were not concerned about the cocoon, but they worried that Ao would not survive the atmospheric re-entry temperature. Blanc wanted to help Ao, but the president did not allow it. However, Commander Ivica told Ao to hold on because he would find a way to save him. Suddenly, the cocoon near Naru formed an opening, and it also opened near Ao's location. He hid inside, and unexpectedly, inside was a machine. The cocoon began to split apart and revealed that inside was a massive aircraft. A robot stepped out and moved forward, signaling for Ao to approach. Ao was then shielded by the ship and safely returned to Earth. When the ship fell into the sea, he and the other robot landed on it. But when Ao exited the cockpit, he suddenly saw that the pilot resembled his mother. She introduced herself as Eureka, and she did not understand why Ao had hair like hers. Ao then had to stay on this ship with Eureka while waiting for rescuers. Ao caught some fish for food, but the fish pulled too hard, forcing Eureka to run over and grab him to prevent him from falling into the sea. And from this we also learned that Eureka was pregnant. When they went inside the ship to eat and talk, Ao learned that Eureka came from another Earth different from the one he lived on, and on Eureka's Earth, humans considered the cocoons as homes and lived inside them. The US military at that moment heard that Eureka had appeared once again and was together with Ao, whom they were hunting. Even though the two of them had fallen into Japanese waters, the US insisted that they would not let Japan get to them first. Meanwhile, the Japanese commander met a high-ranking officer named Colonel Endo to ask for his assistance in securing Eureka. And although the International Protection Team had tried to conceal Eureka's return, the Japanese military had still obtained the information early. When they boarded the ship, the captain asked the commander who the girl was. He quickly approached and questioned why Truth had come here. Truth wanted the Japanese military to leave Eureka to him, and he would allow them to take Ao's Nervash, but the commander pointed a gun at Truth, unwilling to compromise, because the Japanese government did not intend to confront the International Protection Team. However, Truth simply turned away, letting the commander see that threats had no effect on him. Meanwhile, Eureka's team was trying to reach Ao and Eureka as quickly as possible. Blanc did not know who Eureka was or why everyone panicked at her mention, so Rebecca explained that she was Ao's mother, though that was in the past, and the current Eureka seemed to be just a strange girl who appeared from inside the cocoon. But a member of Hannah's crew then revealed that 10 years earlier, the cocoons had appeared at the same time Eureka arrived on Earth, and she had taught humans how to fight them, which led to the creation of the International Protection Team. The president was now torn between two choices. One was to choose safety by having Ao bring Eureka back, but abandon the ship. The other was to let Ao protect Eureka at all costs and wait for reinforcements to keep the ship as well. Meanwhile, Ao talked with Eureka and asked her about the father of her child, and she said it was Renton, someone rather childish but whom she deeply loved. She did not know where she was now. Her most recent memory was of her and Renton investigating the mysterious disappearance of the cocoons, and then a flash of light occurred and pulled her, the ship, and Renton's Nervash into this world. At that moment, Eureka's group arrived, and he suddenly approached Eureka and greeted her, because 10 years ago, Eureka had met him and revealed that she had once traveled to the future of this time and met him as well as Colonel Endo. At that time, Eureka and Eureka's soldiers were on a mission to recover quartz ore and eliminate monsters. Eureka had been piloting the Nervash and tried to extract the quartz core while humans held the monster back. But the monster fought back so strongly that Eureka had to make the painful decision to let the Nervash fight on its own while she took the quartz ore and disappeared into the light column, knowing she would have to leave her little child alone in this world. Noru was also coincidentally saved by the Nervash and partially absorbed some of its power during the event. Afterward, the president came to recruit Eureka, but he chose to return to his homeland. Ao, still not understanding Eureka's words, was told that the current Eureka would later travel back to meet him, and the child in her womb was Ao himself. Meanwhile, Blanc analyzed Jorg's data and discovered that the ship Eureka used to come here had been built in the year 12,000, proving that she truly came from the distant future, not another planet. Ao then noticed that Gazelle's group had also followed them here, and Gazelle explained that his mission from the president was to bring Eureka back to serve research purposes on the monsters and cocoons. Eureka, however, insisted that Eureka must return 13 years earlier to follow the proper timeline, while Gazelle speculated that Eureka had fallen for Eureka and only wanted to keep her away from the organization. Ao was furious, as Gazelle always acted like he knew everything and interfered in his affairs. Suddenly, their ship was ambushed, and Eureka was captured by the Japanese forces. Eureka, recognizing Endo, fired to quickly retrieve Eureka. Ao, fighting Gazelle at that moment, suddenly saw another Eureka appear before him, and he ran to lead her away. Truth revealed himself, isolating Ao from the others, and blocked Endo's path to claim Eureka. while Ao suddenly woke to see a projection of his real mother, who urged him to bring the current Eureka to Renton and explained that the real monsters were not their enemies. Gazelle overheard but did not understand, and then Eureka disappeared. Ivica arrived and tried to stop Truth, but he was attacked by him. Al piloted the Nervash to intervene but was flung away, and the robot's head was torn apart. Endo then recalled that Eureka had once asked him to take care of Al if something happened to her, and now he finally had the chance to meet Al. He stood up and fiercely attacked Truth, but as a former soldier, he could not hold his ground for more than 3 seconds in front of him. Eureka tried to flee but was attacked by Truth, while Gazelle quickly signaled for her to jump down, and Ao continued to stand against Truth. Eureka then reached her Nervash and flew up to fight alongside Ao. Meanwhile, Naru experienced a fantasy world and believed she had understood the truth of this world. She later appeared in the middle of a construction site and was discovered by workers. Back in the battle, the Japanese commander assumed Colonel Endo's death was caused by the Nervash of the International Protection Team and demanded the captain fight, while Ao's group saw a light column nearby, and Ao explained to Eureka that the cocoons and monsters originated from that light column, so if she flew into it, she could return. Hearing this, the two ignored Truth and flew away, but he pursued and attacked them. Blanc and Elena also arrived to support Ao and Eureka, but Elena suddenly acted strangely, attempting to destroy Eureka herself. She lunged to stab Eureka, but Truth accidentally took the hit, making Ao think Elena had just saved them. Ao then told everyone his intention because he no longer wanted the president and Truth to chase Eureka, and Gazelle, seeing Ao's maturity, decided not to interfere with him. Just as Eureka was about to fly to the light column, she was attacked by the Japanese forces. Her Nervash suddenly acted on its own, ejecting her from the cockpit and flying away, and Ao had to catch her. Ao did not understand why Eureka's Nervash moved independently, and she explained that there was something inside it similar to herself. Eureka's Nervash flew down to block the Japanese army and then confronted Truth. Ao quickly brought Eureka close to the light column, but a monster suddenly appeared, immediately pushing Ao away from the column. So Eureka activated the weapon system inside Ao's Nervash to attack the monster, destroying it quickly, allowing Ao to bring Eureka near the light column once again. Eureka questioned why Ao called her mother, and he made up a reason to hide the truth. Eureka then revealed that the child in her womb was a girl, which further aroused Ao's suspicions. As Eureka approached the light column, a damaged Nervash appeared to take her, and Ivica then ordered her ship to be shot down so no one could seize it. The Japanese commander, however, salvaged the monster's body, believing that they had come to destroy the Nervash robot rather than target the cocoons. Ao then returned home to see his grandfather, rifled through old photos of his mother, and asked if he knew anything about his father, to which he replied that his mother had said his father was fighting to protect him, letting Ao realize his father never abandoned his mother and him as he had always thought. Ao then asked if he had any sisters, which led his grandfather to suspect he had just met Eureka, and he recalled some things and took Ao to see Naru in the hospital. Ao went up to the rooftop to meet Naru, while his grandfather noticed something unusual was happening. Ao recounted his dream where Naru was with Truth, and she confirmed it was real, having witnessed some things in her dream and glimpsed far-off futures where humans would leave Earth, until one day an alien race arrived, reviving dead coral and creating cocoons. They communicated with humans, who then returned to Earth. At that moment, the Japanese commander arrived, claiming that the cocoons, or more accurately the alien corals, were a disease and that Naru's body was filled with substances emitted by the cocoons, so he assumed Naru was sick and needed isolation. The Japanese government announced that the monsters were actually a means to protect the world from the alien corals. Since Okinawa was where most cocoons fell, the Japanese forces took the opportunity to land and seize the disputed territory, blaming Ao for Colonel Endo's death, meaning he would also be detained. When Ao returned to the port, he found his Nervash had been taken. Pipo's father explained that the US government had accused him, and shielding him was illegal. To avoid war, Okinawa had to hand over Naru and Ao. The Japanese commander considered the alien corals a disease, but Naru viewed them as divine medicine and friends. She reached out and was carried away by a cluster of coral. Confused, Ao ran to his nerve ash to rescue Naru, but the Japanese commander aimed at him, and others blocked the shot. Naru then reunited with Truth, who let her control the nerve ash that Eureka had left behind. The image of Ao's mother appeared, urging Naru to help Ao destroy the alien corals, but Naru rejected the message. She then flew up, hoping Ao would follow, but he insisted the nerve ash was not hers and wanted her to stay away from Truth. Disappointed, Naru had hoped to accompany him rather than wait for him to protect her, so she destroyed nearby military equipment and departed. Upon returning to the organization, Ao dreamed of Naru being taken away by Truth, powerless to stop it, which ironically mirrored what had actually happened to him. Alex then woke Ao and told him to return to his bedroom instead of trying to finish the unfinished work there, because they would not allow a sleep-deprived pilot like him to go into battle, and the spare parts for repairing nerve ash were already available, so he could rest without worry. Eureka at this time noticed that the monsters were appearing more frequently, taking increasingly human-like forms, and each time they appeared, they emitted a signal that Jorg had just begun to analyze. Ever since the Japanese government released information stating that the monsters were allies and the alien corals were the enemy, the world had begun to shift. The entire International Defense Organization suddenly underwent a health checkup led by Hannah, but she had to return to space, and on the way to the station, she met Gazelle, who suspected that Hannah's health check was really targeting Ao. Ao later sneaked to meet Gazelle to obtain some sleeping pills, as he had been suffering from insomnia due to nightmares about Naru. Gazelle asked if he had thought about what his mother had said before, but Ao ignored it. Soon after, the Japanese military shared research data they had collected from the monster's head. Discovering it emitted waves that could be used to communicate with the monsters. Han and Pippo were sent there to extract information, but shortly after, both the Japanese forces and the International Defense Organization received news that an alien coral whose core had been previously extracted had suddenly reactivated. Ivica's team quickly set out to handle it and discovered that monsters had arrived as well. The monsters now had fully human forms and a much larger operational range. Elena fired rockets from afar, but they had no effect even though the monsters took full hits. Ao chose to engage in close combat but was shot back. He tried to dodge, yet the monster's missiles could track targets, and despite his efforts, he was hit and downed. Ivica immediately requested the president to send reinforcements. The 3 girls from Bruno's team were dispatched, and Gazelle was added to the support team. When Ivica tried to contact Ao, he realized Gazelle had arrived and was piloting nerve ash in Ao's place. The president also received news that all alien corals that had been inactive suddenly reactivated, with quartz appearing inside them, unsurprisingly orchestrated by Truth and Naru. Ao then woke to find Chloe beside him. She was now uncertain who their real enemies were and showed Ao that the coral clusters were growing again. Since Ao's nerve ash was damaged, they would replace him in the battle, and he was told to rest and avoid causing trouble. However, when Chloe's team left, Ao changed and went to battle again, reaching the command room where the monsters had appeared. He planned to use himself and nerve ash as bait so others could attack, but Ivica rejected this and ordered Elena and Blanc to bring Ao back to wait for instructions. Jorg now had the ability to interpret the monster's language using data Han had stolen from the Japanese military. But Han and Pippo were soon discovered by security and luckily helped by a senior inspector. Jorg was suddenly hacked, and the monsters introduced themselves, claiming their mission was to eliminate the alien corals from Earth, and that humans were attacked simply because it was their instinct to destroy anything obstructing their goal. Ivica asked why the corals had suddenly reactivated, and they explained that 10 years ago, a large amount of quartz had been suddenly extracted from the corals. Ivica did not want them to continue, so he agreed to help destroy the corals, but the monsters refused, stating that their purpose was to eliminate the corals on behalf of humans. The US government then called the president, asserting that the monsters were only targeting the quartz, which had always been in the president's possession, and demanded that he take action to change the situation. The president replied that he was keeping the quartz safely in space and that the monsters would still need to be eliminated. The president then formulated a plan for all teams, stating that there were currently 18 locations where alien corals had reactivated and monsters were attacking. So he would use all the quartz cores he possessed to lure all the monsters to the North Pole and eliminate them at once with heavy firepower. Gazelle advised Ao to get enough sleep, even if he had to use medication, because he wouldn't have the strength to fight while sleep deprived. Ao was now quite confused, unsure of who his real enemies were, so Gazelle asked whether he wanted to return to the island. Meanwhile, the world had split into two factions. One still trusted the International Defense Organization and its new campaign, while the other distrusted them for hiding the existence of the quartz cores from the world. The US government had pledged support for the International Defense Organization, but the Global Alliance did not, believing the president was acting independently, treating the quartz as his private property. Ao's team was then deployed, and from the space station, Hana launched a small ship containing all the quartz cores. Nauru stood to defend their home island from the monsters. But the quartz ship flew past and drew the monsters' attention, as all monsters worldwide sensed the massive quartz and immediately pursued it. Ao's group's task was only to follow and monitor the quartz ship, without approaching too closely to engage. However, shortly after, Ao suddenly woke up in a tent. Blanc and Elena explained that he had fallen asleep while following the quartz ship, so they had brought him back. When he was ready to depart again, he noticed many other factions joining the campaign. On the way, Ao learned that they would need to deal with monsters at a factory, where Chloe's parents worked. Soon after, Ao dreamed of Nauru, who wanted him to protect the corals with her. He was then awakened by two girls from his team, who informed him that Chloe's team was in trouble. 25 minutes earlier, a Soviet missile had been launched but targeted the quartz ship instead, and they suspected Truth of causing the deviation. Chloe's team had to destroy the missiles, but the explosions had caused the quartz ship to veer off course, preventing it from reaching the North Pole on its original trajectory. Ao's group was tasked with stabilizing the ship and returning it to its original path. They departed. Blanc approached the ship and lifted it, while Elena, seeing monsters approaching, had to fly out to intercept them, but she was quickly hit and damaged. Blanc then took a risk, activating the third engine to try to adjust the ship's trajectory as quickly as possible, but the third engine suddenly malfunctioned. The president ordered his daughter to retreat and decided to detonate the ship. Knowing the explosion would at least eliminate a large portion of the monsters, though part of the nearby land would be wiped out. He issued evacuation orders. Those who escaped in time would survive, while the unlucky would not. Ao chose to act independently and launched despite being scheduled to deploy after Blanc finished her work, wanting to change the situation and prevent anyone from dying. Ivica allowed him under the condition that he would return afterward. Ao went to assist Blanc, instructing her to take Elena to safety first while he handled the situation. He then attempted to move the ship, but the monsters pursued quickly, forcing him to lift it higher. He crushed the ship's hull and carried the entire quartz load upward. Suddenly, the quartz transformed into a weapon in Ao's hands, allowing him to fire a shot that destroyed all the pursuing monsters. Upon returning, Ao was praised for completing the mission, despite the plan going slightly off course. When he landed, he asked about the nearby coral and learned that there were no alien corals there, and it seemed that Chloe's team had vanished entirely, as if their existence had been erased. Upon returning to the base, Ao was taken for a checkup, and no one knew what the Bruno team he mentioned was. He asked Gazelle to investigate the area where they had just landed, and Gazelle reported that the place had long been uninhabited. The three girls of the Bruno team had never existed in any organizational database, so Gazelle thought Ao must have been hallucinating from sleep deprivation. However, Ao knew clearly that this happened because he had done something wrong. Hannah's team members were studying Ao's cannon and suspected it might have the ability to alter reality. Something had clearly changed, though no one recognized it. No one knew what had shifted, but Eureka pondered what Ao had said. Ao was then spotted in the command room and was tactfully escorted out. At the same time, several people appeared in the base, exposed to the gas emitted by alien corals. This gas resembled the energy Ao had fired, and they all resembled Naru. Ao then encountered the purple-shirted older brother from before, who was inspecting a dormant coral with laborers. However, citizens had begun to rise against the International Defense Organization, believing the Japanese government's claims that the monsters were dangerous. They fired smoke, but the workers mistook it for toxic gas and panicked, causing the purple-shirted older brother to trip, fall from a height, and die. As tensions escalated, Naru suddenly appeared and saved him. The police arrived, recognized Naru, and aimed their guns at her. But she summoned Nervash and flew high, reviving and enlarging the coral. Blanc and Elena were meanwhile filming a commercial for an anime based on the International Defense Organization. But the series was about to be cancelled due to public opposition over the president monopolizing courts. Ao went to Gazelle's team, and Gazelle reaffirmed that Chloe's team did not exist, but Ao insisted he had erased them from reality. Hearing this, Han produced a notebook he received from the Japanese commander, which claimed that the existence of monsters and corals had distorted the world, warping history. The notebook mentioned a scientist who had witnessed the first coral landing, then encountered and adopted a boy who knew part of the world's truth. The scientist had documented this in his theory and was considered insane. Han studied the theory further, noting it recorded that the world population was once 7 billion but had halved. The exploitation of energy from corals had only recently been applied to gradually replace nuclear energy. Any coral appearing near a nuclear plant could have catastrophic consequences. The Japanese commander also adhered to this scientist's theory. Upon hearing this, Ao seemed to understand something and ran to Jorg to request information on the members of Chloe's team. Elena and Blanc, searching for Ao, overheard his quest and followed. This time, Ao found information about them. Since no coral outbreak had occurred in Chloe's hometown, she had never faced any disaster to require joining a pilot team, and she was now simply living a normal life. History had changed, but the people themselves were not erased. Ao then requested a day off to visit Chloe's new home, with Elena and Blanc accompanying him to supervise. He saw her family living safely, but wondered whether not becoming a pilot had made them happier. Jorg advised Ao to observe their lives carefully, but Ao avoided it, unwilling to know too much. A few days later, Ao's team set out to deal with a coral cluster appearing at sea, but the United Nations had declared ownership over it, forbidding the International Defense Organization from intervening. The president then ordered everyone to return, as the UN had exposed his concealment of the quartz, limiting the organization's operational rights. Suddenly, Ao's cannon activated on its own and tried to break free from the ship. Jorg believed the ship could not contain the cannon's will, and it flew into Nervash, completely beyond Ao's control. The cannon dragged Ao near a coral cluster and absorbed the quartz. The UN considered this an act of rebellion and opened fire, forcing Ao to flee far to shake them off. When the cannon finally stopped, he released it, but was immediately captured by Truth. Ao realized it was dangerous, capable of altering the world, but it was exactly what Truth needed. Truth then created a hand of water to drag Ao into the sea, where he once again met his mother, who trusted that he now understood what had happened to her. Time travel had caused Eureka to have issues, allowing her to appear only briefly before him, but Ao believed his cannon could help him find his mother. Eureka explained that his father, Renton, was also searching for the cannon, which was still incomplete. Ao decided he would finish it. He flew up to retrieve the cannon from Truth, intending to shoot him, but Truth agreed to stand still, and Ao hesitated, fearing further alterations to reality if he fired. The US military arrived, prompting Truth to leave. They contacted Ao, offering support he could no longer receive from the International Defense Organization. Elena and Blanc flew to bring Ao back, but he refused both, choosing instead to go with US forces. Meanwhile, Elena and Blanc worked on stabilizing the third engine, believing only by matching Ao's skill could they earn the trust he needed. At this time, a senior inspector presented Ao with agreements, promising him freedom of action as long as he operated under their alliance. 13 years prior, the inspector knew how Ao's mother had arrived in this world and that Nervash had dropped her from a height. The US government found Nervash, but his mother disappeared. Years later, when the first coral appeared, they needed a pilot for Nervash, and Ao's mother had agreed to help. The inspector understood the president's motive for hiding the quartz, but now believed that with Ao's cannon, there was a cleaner way to handle it. Meanwhile, Eureka received footage of negotiations between Ao and the US, showing they wanted to bring him under their control, but they did not understand why he chose to go with them. Ao called Eureka, expressing guilt and a desire not to involve them, but Eureka felt Ao had lost faith in them. Ao hung up, reasoning that leaving the cannon with the organization would be dangerous, yet he could not discard it because he needed it to reunite with his mother. Blanc later informed Elena that Ao would not be returning. Elena questioned why, but Blanc did not know, frustrating her deeply. She felt Blanc was always indifferent. He wanted to know everything but never asked questions directly. She had never asked Ao why he left or inquired about the small grave there, and Blanc never asked her. The two argued, had a brief scuffle, and left. Blanc then sought Gazelle to get advice, but was disappointed when Gazelle joked, so she left. Blanc changed into her pilot's suit when an engineer came to request her help stopping Elena, who planned to leave alone to find Ao. Blanc intercepted her. Knowing she lacked the fuel to reach the US, Alex discovered that the third engines on both their units could now activate, so he instructed them to find Ao and ask why he abandoned the organization. Both soon located the US military vessel and landed. They threatened Ao that if he did not show himself, they would destroy the place, so he revealed himself, and the two asked if he truly wanted to leave the organization. They did not ask for his reasons, only about his feelings. Ao still did not wish to leave, so both demanded he return. The senior inspector did not want him to go but lacked the power to stop him, so he could only watch as Ao left. Shortly after, the US government declared the International Defense Organization a terrorist group for attacking their vessel. When Ao's team returned to base, they met Gazelle, who admitted he had intentionally provoked Blanc so she would go fetch Ao. Now, the monsters were no longer their only enemy. The entire world had become a threat. That night, the base lost power. After investigating, Rebecca discovered the electricity company had stopped supplying power due to unintervention. Eureka urgently tried to contact the president, but he delayed the meeting, working on a plan with Jorg. Soon, the president appeared, and Blanc and Ao believed they were partly responsible for the current situation. But the president also acknowledged fault for letting Blanc pilot the aircraft without fully ensuring safety. He then announced that from now on, they would no longer fight monsters but focus on preventing the coral from spreading globally. Japan, hearing that the International Defense Organization had been isolated, suddenly faced Truth, who sought the monster's head. When Japan asked why, Truth explained that since Ao fired the cannon, monsters had not appeared despite the growing corals. The head, now understanding human language, stated that the monsters were preparing for a major attack and called Truth one of their kind, revealing that he himself was a monster. Truth refused to accept this and tried to fight, but the head said monsters cannot harm one another, so there was no need to struggle. Truth then sought Naru, who admitted she knew Truth was a monster. On the day Eureka took the quartz without destroying the monster left on Earth lost its goal, was accepted by the world, and was given the ability to transform into a human, the child that became Truth. Truth still could not accept this, but according to Naru, she was the one guiding everything. He then flew straight into space and began controlling numerous satellites. Hannah's team discovered a shower of satellite debris heading toward them, impossible to avoid. and the space station exploded. The US military, hearing of the satellite attack, launched a mission to seize the defense organization's station if it remained. Meanwhile, Rebecca had to take Jorg's version down because he had been infiltrated and synchronized by the monsters. She still hoped to negotiate with the UN, so it was critical that Jorg's hack remained undiscovered. Gazelle noted that the organization no longer discriminated against or fought monsters. Now, their goal was revenge for Hannah's team. The US government then ordered all personnel at the International Defense Organization to evacuate the base, as it was suspended. But Ao's team would still go into battle, bringing the cannon. Ao worried about using it, but Elena revealed to both of them that she was not from this world. She came from another dimension and wanted Ao's help to return. Alex had to transfer Jorg to the group's aircraft, which would take some time. The president then whispered to Blanc that he wanted to escape with his daughter because the organization was truly finished. Blanc then approached Ao, asking him to accompany her temporarily. She led him to the underground storage of the cannon to search for her father once more and shot him outright upon realizing he was not her true father. Truth was forced to reveal his true form and pushed both of them away, still desiring the cannon. But just then, the real president arrived and extracted both of them from the situation. He wanted Ao to lead his daughter away and uncover the truth about the world, whether the monsters were truly good or if they had some hidden schemes. He then locked the door and ordered them both to leave immediately, drawing his gun to face Truth. But an ordinary human like him was hopeless. However, he revealed to Truth that he suspected him to be a monster with amnesia. Though he still retained a common trait of the monsters, they would explode upon contact with quartz, and he had stored a large supply there. He activated the furnace behind him, sending the quartz containers toward Truth, causing him to explode. Jorg, or rather the monster that had infiltrated, then asked Ao what had happened inside. After learning that Truth had touched the core and exploded, it explained to Ao that monsters like them were creatures that hunted quartz, and any contact would trigger an explosion to destroy the quartz, regardless of obstacles nearby. Blanc did not want to hear this, but Ao needed the information because the president had suggested the monsters might not be inherently evil. Gazelle then arrived to take both of them away, uncertain when the UN might strike. Ao met with Eureka's group to report the events, planning to return for the cannon with Jorg's help to start the system. Rebecca did not understand why Jorg was still operational, and Jorg explained that Ao's machine had its own security system. Rebecca opposed the plan, favoring a safe method to ensure everyone survived, but ultimately, all agreed to fight for the truth. Ao boarded Nervash to retrieve the cannon, while Eureka took Jorg onto the main ship to start it up. Rebecca still hesitated, but Eureka respected that the children had made their own choices and wanted her to decide. He handed Jorg to her, and seeing Eureka's trust, she chose to join the group. The UN began attacking after civilians evacuated, but Eureka waited for Ao to return before launching. Ao told them to go ahead, confident he could escape after securing the cannon. Near the storage, the cannon suddenly reacted and flew upward, dragging a mountain of quartz and destroying the base. Eureka's ship quickly took off before the base collapsed. Ao decided to no longer fear the cannon, jumped to grab it, and absorbed all the quartz. Blanc asked Elena about the incident, but Elena's signal was gone. Ao aimed his gun, but Hannah's team stopped him, all safe thanks to evacuating before the space station exploded, though they lost 200 crew members. Hannah indicated her team would side with the UN, so Eureka ordered Ao to withdraw, giving them time to plan their next move. Ao's team then flew into space, and Blanc called him to find Elena, but she had disappeared, having chosen to betray and side with the UN. Suddenly, Hannah detected a signal from the ruins. A robot emerged, the same one that appeared after the first coral event, which alone had leveled a large area. Truth had now merged with the robot and attacked the UN. Ao's team returned to Earth and was contacted by the Japanese Prime Minister, who offered them shelter and support in battle. The president had made a contract with Japan and the monsters. Because Ao's unstable cannon was a threat, no one wanted him to use it. They would assist him so he wouldn't have to fire it. Ultimately, if Ivica's team cleared all the quartz cores, monsters would cease to appear, and there would be no further need to fight them. If the president died during the contract's term, the agreement would transfer to Blanc. Thus, Japan officially declared it would sponsor Ivica's team to help them remove all quartz. A few days later, Ao had several flight training sessions with the Japanese military. Any unship attempting to enter Japan would be intercepted by monsters and warned before being attacked, ensuring Japan's safety for a while longer. Blanc had become the new president in place of her father and, along with Rebecca, negotiated with the Japanese authorities. On the way back, Blanc returned first to give Rebecca and Gazelle privacy. Rebecca realized that Elena had truly betrayed them and resolved to inform the others herself. Elena, now in the S, had met a girl named Maggie, a member of U.S. Special Forces unit composed of people exposed to the coral's gas. Once authorities determined the gas was not a disease, but something exploitable, Hannah informed Naru that more people carrying the coral gas were appearing, and the islanders had risen against the military, demanding the alien coral be returned to nature. Meanwhile, Blanc officially began cooperating with the Japanese military, and the former commander who had pursued them had mellowed after drinking at a party. Gazelle took him aside to rest, and he admitted he had once blindly trusted Truth in hopes of saving the chaotic world, though Gazelle argued that Truth had caused the current disorder. Elena, talking with Maggie, was suddenly confronted by Eureka, and she demanded to be returned to her own world. But Eureka explained she had only rescued Elena from a coral outbreak. Elena was actually from this world, and the world she had seen in her subconscious was Eureka's world during the time travel. Elena was shocked, realizing she was not an alien but still a human of Earth. Meanwhile, Ao woke up in the home of a pilot from the Japanese military after having dinner with him the night before. The former commander was discussing with Jorg, the monster, about wanting to bring Japan to world domination. But Jorg had studied human history and knew many dictators had sought the same and paid the price. Maggie also investigated and discovered a hypothesis that Eureka had sent Elena 20 years into the future to save her. Another coral outbreak appeared, and Ao's team quickly set out to resolve it. 3 humanoid monsters, following Jorg's orders, went ahead to clear the path, allowing Ao to easily retrieve the core. As he reached the ground, Elena attacked him, desperately trying to force him to shoot her with the cannon to return her to her world. Everyone wanted Ao to stop her, but he refused. Elena's attacks became more frenzied to coerce him, until Maggie intervened, confirming that Elena was indeed from Earth and had only traveled in time. Elena, however, could not accept her Earth origin, believing she belonged somewhere better. Ao had to reason with her until she went from frenzied to utterly helpless, unable to change his mind. At that moment, Truth suddenly appeared, intent on destroying everything. Ao immediately engaged him in battle. Blanc did not know Truth's true motives, since he was a monster and had previously cooperated with the Japanese government, yet now sought total destruction. The monster head explained that Truth was extremely unstable, having absorbed too much energy from quartz, creating a vortex of energy around him. Even seeing the energy flow, Ao struggled to fight because Nervash still lacked one thing, a heart. Ao was caught in Truth's vortex and thrown from a great height, but Naru controlled the coral to catch Ao and carry him away, bringing him safely back to the island. Elena later returned to Ivica's team, while Truth, discovering Ao's whereabouts, went into a rage, flying off to search for him and destroying all ships in his path. Later, Ivica's team encountered the monster head, which had been attached to Elena's aircraft, and it explained that Truth was no longer a normal monster like the others. He had been hybridized between human and coral cells. The coral blocks contained smaller coral cells, which could invade and assimilate other living beings for communication. 10 years ago, Truth lost his goal when Eureka took the quartz block, and to allow him to survive in this world, the coral cells invaded and sustained him. Ao and Naru had a discussion about their ideals and factions, but Hannah soon came for them. At the US military base, those carrying coral cells suddenly deteriorated as the cells corroded their bodies. Hana informed Naru, and they suspected Truth was the cause. His energy storm had stimulated the coral cells, allowing them to overtake their hosts. If Truth reached the island, many infected people would be corroded. Hana and her team would go ahead to cooperate with Ivica's team. While Ao understood why Naru trusted the coral, she wanted everyone to carry the coral cells so no one would discriminate against him. Naru also realized she could not stop Ao from fighting Truth, so she revealed that Nervash still lacked something. Truth then appeared and began attacking the area. Hana's team quickly mobilized to stop him, and 2 underwater monsters also rushed to intervene. The monster head asked Truth what he truly was: monster, coral, or human, but he disregarded species, existing only as Truth. He destroyed the 2 monsters to escape and damaged the head. Ao and Naru piloted Nervash to engage him. In the distant future, a figure resembling Ao's father searched for survivors and discovered 7 columns of light, which he interpreted as a signal and called Nervash into action to retrieve Eureka. Factions worldwide moved to counter Truth. The monster head, seemingly destroyed, had instead fully merged with Jorg and could exist digitally. Meanwhile, Naru unexpectedly turned against Ao and assisted Truth, easily defeating Ao's team, believing Ao could not defeat Truth without defeating her first, as her Nervash had a heart and was alive, whereas his was only a machine. Naru then summoned Truth atop a colossal humanoid coral, believing Truth resembled her and should help the coral faction dominate the world. Ao pursued, insisting Naru had made the wrong choice by trusting Truth. Truth then realized everything and concluded that humans and all living beings should not exist, intending to annihilate the world to make it ideal. He attacked Naru, forcing Hana's team to stabilize her cockpit to prevent her from falling into the sea. A Hana pilot tried to restrain Truth for Ao to fire the cannon, but Ao hesitated, unable to attack both. Truth took the opportunity to escape, caught Ao, severed Nervash's arm, and aimed the cannon at him, intending to erase himself from the world, while Ao refused, fearing further changes. The cannon activated. Ao later awoke, back to normal, but his battle now faced Naru as an adversary, accused of stealing the robot previously inhabited by Truth. No one remembered Truth's existence, only seeing Naru as the sole criminal. After subduing Naru, the team returned to base the next day, where Naru's family came only to hear that she had been accused of terrorism for protecting the alien coral blocks. Ao then realized that with this shot, Truth's existence had completely disappeared, and the robot was now considered to have been stolen by the Okinawa Allied forces and Naru to protect the coral blocks and eliminate the monsters. Suddenly, Ao noticed something flying out from the light column, so he ran to check it out. When he arrived, he saw a Nervash speeding toward the island, destroying the coral there. His cannon automatically absorbed the quartz, but the other Nervash approached him, and the pilot entered the cockpit to meet him. He opened the cockpit and was confused why Ao was the pilot instead of Eureka. Eureka had meanwhile appeared at Ivica's location, and Blanc informed Ao, so he realized who was in front of him. The pilot asked Ao to take him to see Eureka. Upon reuniting, Eureka apologized for only being able to quietly watch Ao grow without helping him, and the pilot introduced himself as Renton, Ao's father. Ao wanted to punch Renton, but Ivica stopped him, wanting Renton to explain Eureka's situation, specifically that the coral had discovered a way to expand by using quartz to travel through time and space. Eureka had been displaced to an unknown location by transporting a large amount of quartz through the light column, making her existence ambiguous across spaces. This cannon could also alter time and space. Renton and Ao returned to the island to meet him, and Ao asked what Renton had done in the past 10 years. Renton said that Ao's 10 years were only a short period to him. They played ball while talking, discussing that in the future, the coral had invaded Earth, and monsters were automatically created to defend against and destroy them. The coral then discovered a way to travel back in time to escape the monsters, but they were still pursued and destroyed even in the past. Humans in the future gradually went extinct due to absorbing coral cells and being killed by monsters. In a critical moment, Renton had to send Eureka through the coral's light column to keep her safe, while he stayed behind to eliminate all the coral. Renton's reason for exterminating the coral was that they had once protected it, so they needed to correct their mistakes, a matter for adults in which Ao had no obligation to participate. Renton then kicked Ao aside and flew off, taking Nervash and the cannon to return to the future. Ao pursued him. Renton intended to destroy the first coral tree to erase it from the timeline, but Ao knew that if the tree was destroyed, Eureka, lost in time and space, would vanish along with its power. Ao would not allow that, while Renton believed Eureka was ready to sacrifice herself. When Renton tried to shake off Ao, Ao heard Truth's voice. Renton realized Ao's Nervash had a heart, and that heart was Truth. Ao understood that Truth had not completely disappeared, but had become the heart of his Nervash. Renton did not know how Ao's Nervash could have a heart, as there should only be one Nervash like that. Ao thanked Renton for considering him. He also learned what had happened to his sister. When she was born, the future's high energy density petrified her, causing her death, which was why his parents had gone far away to return here, ensuring his safe birth. Ao realized he did not need his father to erase the coral trees, as Naru and many others were symbiotic with the coral cells, and if it disappeared, so would their existence. Though Ao knew this world was imperfect and flawed, it shaped him, so he overcame and took the cannon from Renton. He then said goodbye to Blanc and flew straight into the light column, requesting Truth to take him 10 years back, to the moment his mother was about to leave. Ao appeared, and Eureka immediately recognized him. She revealed that she remembered Ao from the time they had fallen into the sea together, and the broken Nervash that had appeared back then was in fact Ao from the present. Ao now knew everything about Eureka, and Renton also arrived at that moment, so Ao asked his father to take his mother away, because he believed this moment was the reason he was born. Renton then took Eureka away as Ao requested, and Ao let the cannon absorb the quartz. He then flew upward and fired directly at the teleportation gates. When he opened his eyes, Ao was drifting in outer space and saw that his parents had carved their names on the moon like children. Ao drifted for a long time and eventually returned 2 years after the main timeline where all the events of the story had taken place. Truth explained that Ao had erased his own existence with the final shot, so no one would remember him anymore, but Ao believed that ensuring his mother's happiness was still worth it compared to his own non-existence. He then took Renton's board to go explore the new world where he no longer existed, while Truth would continue drifting for some time. And thus, the story came to an end.